biggest fear that most real estate investors have is that they're going to buy a house and later find out that it has some serious structural issues. The problem? These are exactly the kind of issues that your insurance won't cover. And most contractors aren't going to spot them on the initial walkthrough either. And in this video and this entire series, I'm going to help you understand how these structural problems actually happen, what to do before you buy the house, and what to do if you're already knee-deep in a project and one of these landmines gets uncovered. Because here's the truth. These landmines don't just blow up your budget. They kill deals, crush timelines, and break first-time investors. If you know how to spot them, if you know how to break them down into parts and avoid what I call the fear tax, you'll not only survive these landmines, but you'll actually ethically profit from them. So let's get into it, starting with the first principles to make sure you can follow along through the rest of the video. So we're talking about the wood structure of a house and nothing else. We'll get into those other components in other videos. Like I said, this is an entire series. So what do I mean exactly by the wood structure? Well, there are four main framing systems in any standard house. The floor system, that's your joist and the beam sitting on top of the foundation. Next is the subfloor. That's the OSB or the plywood that sits on top of the joists. And those two things together make up the floor. And then on top of the floor sits up the walls. That's your studs, the headers, the framing that rise up from the actual floor. Those are the 2x4s. And then on top of that is the roof structure. That's the rafters and the trusses that carry the load of the roof. Now, if it's a 2-story house, you'll just repeat another floor system on top of the walls and another subfloor and then another set of walls all stacked up, and then the roof sits up on top of that. Now, the house sits on top of a foundation that's usually made of concrete or block. Everything above that foundation is wood. Now, obviously, this is a very simple house and some designs are much more complicated. However, these are the bare essentials and every complex design starts from it. Now, with any house, you should think of it like Jenga. If you take a piece out of any one of those systems that stack up on top of each other, everything above it is in jeopardy. Now, again, in this video, we're solely focused on the wood portion of the house because this is the most common source of overlooked and costly surprises. Now, in the 14 years that I've been buying and rehabbing properties, I've found that there are really 3 different things that can destroy the wood structure of a house. And the first one is by far the most common. It's water intrusion. Now, a few years ago, I bought a house and everything was going fine until we started pulling up the carpet in the living room. As soon as we pulled back the carpet under a large window, I saw that the subfloor was completely black. From experience, I knew that I had a serious problem right away. So I felt the wall beneath that big window, and sure enough, it was soft, mushy even. So we kicked out the drywall, and the wood underneath the window had been totally rotted out. Then when I stepped back to really look at it, I could see that the whole wall had sunk. Like I could see that the ceiling had bowed down a little bit. And this is something that is commonly missed in an initial walkthrough. But here's the thing, going back to the Jenga, I couldn't just take the studs out and replace them because the roof sits up on top of those walls. The entire house stacks up once again like this. Foundation, then the floor system, then the subfloor sits on top of that, then the walls sit on top of that, and the roof structure sits on top of that. So I take that wall out, now the roof is in jeopardy. Now, in that case, what I did was I built a temporary support wall outside of the house, literally another wall to hold up the roof while we rebuilt the entire wall. We replaced part of the floor system, which was also rotted from the spread of water. And what you need to understand is there's actually 2 types of water intrusion. There's exterior water intrusion. This is when water from the outside, usually rain, finds its way inside of the house. Now, a properly built house should shed water like this. Rain comes down, hits the roof, it runs down the roof, gets into the gutters, and then the gutters downspouts carry it away from the house. But not all houses do that well. In fact, a lot of them don't. Now, here are the 5 main areas of water intrusion. One is a leaking roof. Now, most people will check a roof to see if it's past its useful life, like looking for curled up shingles, maybe missing shingles, or a general weathered look. But that is not quite good enough. First, you need to look at the top floor of your house. You need to look at the ceiling and see if there's any brown spotting on it. Also look to see if drywall tape has failed. Drywall tape is the first thing that will fail in any sort of moisture. Then I get up in the attic. I look for dark staining on the underside of the roof decking. The most common leak points that you're going to find are plumbing vents, chimneys, skylights. These almost always leak eventually, really not even eventually. It's pretty much immediately, but they are pretty cool. So even knowing this, I decided to install one in my personal house, right over me and my wife's bed. I flashed the living crap out of it since I know these things always leak. First rain, we got waterboarded. Right. My wife, not very happy with. So basically anything that protrudes through the roof, you can basically bet that that is where it's going to leak if it's leaking. It's rare that it leaks in the body of the shingles as long as the shingles aren't super old. Now, just so you understand how a roof is put together, there are basically three main components of a roof. There are the rafters. These are the structural framing. They make the pitch, or once again, the triangle. On top of that sits what we call the decking. This is the plywood or the OSB that sits on top of those rafters. Then on top of that is your tar paper. On top of that are the actual asphalt shingles that you can see from the outside. And then underneath that triangle, the rafters, is the ceiling joist. Now, usually those hold up your drywall. That's like what's right on top of the drywall that you can see from your ceiling. Sometimes when people come in to do a roof replacement, they also replace the decking if they can see the damage that has been done to it. But if water intrusion is ignored for too long, the rafters start to rot as well. I've actually bought houses with brand new shingles to find out that the rafters were completely destroyed underneath. On one house, we literally had to tear off a brand new roof, rebuild the roof structure, then put back on the decking, and then put back on the shingles. Yeah, I know, not cool. Unfortunately, that's not the only time I've had to take off a brand new roof. So just because water's leaking doesn't mean you have structural issues. Sometimes you might just need to re-roof the house to prevent further leaking. Sometimes you can simply flash around the protrusions that have been compromised. So number 2 is gutter failure. If gutters overflow or don't slope properly, water can back up behind them. That rots the fascia and the soffits. If water gets to the fascia, it usually ends up in the soffits as well. Quick building lesson here. The fascia are the vertical section that the gutters hang on. And then underneath is the soffit. That's the underside of the roof between the fascia and the siding. Now, if the damage gets bad enough in here, it will actually rot the ends of those rafters because they're supposed to be protected by the soffit and the fascia. Now, the only real fix if that happens is to run new wood next to the existing rafters. This is what you would call sistering onto them, and then having to put new fascia and new soffit and then reattach the gutters. Now, there have been a lot of houses that I bought where the gutters are almost falling off because the eaves are so rotted. Now, here's the crazy thing, that if the damage isn't too bad, if the rotting isn't too bad, you can usually fix this problem by simply cleaning out the gutters. I know, easy fix, but the houses don't get into the type of shape where you're going to buy them because of stellar maintenance. All right, now the next issue is missing or short eaves. So now you understand what an eave is. Many of the houses that you're going to buy have no eaves at all or really tiny eaves. Basically, the roof ends and the siding starts. And this is a huge problem because, you see, gutters don't really catch 100% of the rainwater. And without overhang, your eaves, water just runs down the siding. And you're probably thinking, well, isn't siding supposed to stop water intrusion? Well, that's where we get to the 4th issue, which is siding issues. And that's going to help you understand the short eave problem. So some of the water is going to hit siding no matter what. But siding usually is not built as watertight as the roof is. So holes, missing flashing, and poor installation let water get into the wall sheathing underneath and ultimately into the wall framing inside. And that always leads to damage over time. So yes, siding can take some water from the rain blowing back in, but if the water is pouring over it because the gutters and the eaves aren't doing their job, you will most definitely have some problems but siding isn't the biggest perpetrator. It's really the windows. So number 5 is failing windows. Improper flashing or breakdown over time allows water to sit on the frame of the window and leak into the wall. So you always want to inspect underneath the windows for softness or damage inside and out. Windows are supposed to be watertight, but if you allow them to get dumped on over and over, the water will win. The bottom line, exterior water intrusion will rot your house from the top down. Hopefully you're starting to understand the points of weakness to be looking for, but exterior water intrusion is not the only water that destroys your structure. So let's talk about the second type of water intrusion. This is interior water intrusion. This one is even more common in certain areas of the house, especially the bathroom and the kitchens. These are the problems that are caused by the water that you intentionally bring into the house, but end up in the wrong place. Say I bought this house from an investor who ran out of money, or at least that's what he told me happened. They had already finished the bathrooms, beautiful new tile, updated showers, looked great. So I priced that into the deal, knowing that I wasn't going to have to renovate the bathrooms. And of course, we were using those bathrooms during the rehab and everything seemed fine until the tiles started to crack. And when tile cracks, it's usually not the tile's fault. So we pulled up the tile and sure enough, the subfloor underneath had been completely rotted out. Turns out the toilet and the tub had been leaking for years. It had been completely hidden underneath all that brand new tile work. And that, my friends, is truly cutting corners. So bye-bye beautiful tile. Lesson 1 here is don't buy houses from shady investors, just like you wouldn't buy a car from a shady mechanic. And lesson number 2 is know the high probability leak points and stress test the crap out of them. So let's get clear on where interior water intrusion mostly comes from. Number 1 is tubs and showers. So water can seep in to the floors or the walls if the caulking fails where the wall meets the tub, or the drain connection could be loose. So every time someone turns on the shower, some water leaks underneath or into the wall. If there's a window in the shower, I promise you there is water getting into there. To stress test, I literally do a bounce test. That's me jumping up and down, common move. Also, I try to get underneath in the crawl space so I can look up and look at the underside of the subfloor. I inspect the walls. I look for any sign of damage or softness. Next, I look at the toilets. These are notorious. See, there's a wax ring that is at the base of every toilet that seals the connection between the toilet and the drain. And that wax ring can and will fail over time. Or it might have been installed wrong in the first place, which happens very commonly. And once it leaks, it soaks the subfloor. And if it's been leaking long enough, it can do a lot of damage to the subfloor and the joists. So once again, bounce test. Feel for softness. See, that tile is not going to crack if it's on a solid subfloor. Next is sinks. So water from the supply lines or the drain can leak onto the floor of the vanity or your kitchen sink. So look around the sink base, in the vanity. Have the cabinets rotted? Is the floor soft underneath or just outside of it? Then you got your water heaters. So I've seen a ton of slow leaks from old water heaters, even new ones, especially from the pressure release valve. That's the pipe that goes on the outside of the water heater. Next is your HVAC systems. They should have a condensation line that drains the water away. But if that line clogs or it backs up, it can seep into the subfloor or into the walls depending on how it's routed out of your house. Now here's the tricky thing with interior leaks. They often happen in the most hidden areas of the house. They're behind walls, under floors, or buried inside bathroom and kitchen remodels. Most contractors won't find them on the initial estimate. And honestly, they're not very motivated to do it because they find this potential multi-$1,000 fix and they know the other contractors that they're competing against in bidding your project are not going to find them. Therefore, they'll have lower bids and they'll lose the job. That's why it's important that you, as the investor, understand how these potential issues are found and the symptoms of them, And so here's what I always check when I walk through a house. I feel around toilets. If the floor gives, I know there's a problem. Press on the walls, inside and outside the shower or the tub. If it's soft or spongy, or if there's any visual clues like discoloration. Open sink cabinets and look for water stains or mold. Walk the floor in the bathrooms slowly. Feel for dips. Do the bounce test. And always check around the water heater and HVAC drain lines for signs of moisture. Now, water leaks, whether they're from outside or inside, are pretty scary to think about. But if you know what you're looking for, you can usually find it in advance. And the repairs aren't that bad if you know how to manage it, which we're going to get into in just a little bit. The thing that truly is terrifying and can really cost you an entire investment is the second of the three major threats to a house. That's wood destroying pests. Because here's the truth. Water damage is predictable. It follows gravity. You can often trace it to the source. But pests, they're sneaky. They hide. And by the time you find them, the damage is already done. Now, there are three main wood destroying pests that you really need to be aware of. There's termites, carpenter ants, and powderpost beetles. Let's break them down. Starting with termites. These are the most well-known and the most destructive. They eat cellulose, which is what wood is ultimately made of. And they don't really care what kind of wood, whether it's the framing, the subfloor, the joist, it's all food to them. Most of the time, these guys come up from the soil. That's why you often find them on the sill plate. That's the bottom piece of your floor system that sits directly on the foundation, or in the lower parts of the wall framing. They build little mud tunnels like highways from the ground up to the wood so that way they can travel in secret. So what you want to look for are those mud tubes along the foundation walls, hollow sounding wood, termite droppings. They look like little tiny pellets, or of course visual clues that there's actually wood being eaten up. That's when it gets real bad. Now, next is carpenter ants. Now, these guys don't eat wood, but they chew through it to create nesting tunnels. So they're kind of like little demolition crews. And most of the time, these guys go for already softened wood, meaning that the wood has been wet before. So in many cases, water intrusion and carpenter ants go hand in hand. What you want to look for are small piles of wood shavings near like the baseboard or the windows, and, well, ants and wood damage. Next is the powderpost beetles. These are ones that most people don't even really know about. They're small beetles that lay eggs in the cracks of wood. And when the eggs hatch, they tunnel through the wood, turning into like a fine talc-like dust. Over time, the wood becomes so riddled with the tunnels that they collapse. You're usually going to find this stuff in like older homes or barns or garages, especially if the wood hasn't been treated. So what you want to look for are these tiny pinholes in the wood surface, fine powder, frass as they call it, beneath those holes, and brittle, hollow sounding framing. Now here's the bigger problem. You might be thinking, okay, well, isn't this just something that a pest inspector would catch before I buy the house? And sure, sometimes, but not always. See, I've had pest reports come back clean only to find hidden termite trails behind the baseboards or behind the drywall once we got into those wall cavities. That's the danger here. These pests are masters at staying hidden until it's too late. And here's the kicker. Just like with water damage, your insurance doesn't cover insect damage in most cases. They consider it preventable, which means if you didn't catch it before buying, it's 100% on you. So what do? Well, before you buy, always inspect crawl spaces and basements. Bring a screwdriver, poke it, like literally poke at it to see if the wood has been compromised. Look for soft spots or tunnels. And if you find any of them, either walk away or reprice the deal, which we're going to get into all that. Next, look for signs on the baseboards, the window frames, and exposed rafters. Pay for a pest inspection, but don't rely on it blindly. Get your own eyes on the structure too. You know that my key to being a successful investor is, yes, hire pros to do their thing, but realize that you're the leader. Nothing gets done with blind trust. Now, if you get caught and find some of this activity mid-rehab, well, we're going to get into how to handle change orders in just a minute, so bear with me. But now that you've seen how water can silently eat away your house from the inside out, and how pests can literally chew through the bones of your investment, well, there's one more threat that you need to watch out for. And this one, well, it doesn't come from nature. It comes from the people who worked on the house before you. It's bad workmanship and DIY structural damage. Over the years, I've walked through hundreds of properties. And let me tell you, the scariest ones aren't the ones with mold or rot or bugs. It's the ones where someone clearly tried to fix something and they didn't know what the heck they were doing. In fact, this is one of the few things that will cause me to literally run away from a deal because you just don't know how deep the problems go. This is what I call the pro DIYer. And bad workmanship doesn't just look ugly. It breaks the structure. It creates new problems and it hides the real ones. You'll usually see this in houses where someone tried to finish a basement themselves, maybe added square footage like a porch or a deck, and they did it without pulling permits. Or they made structural changes without proper support, like opening up a kitchen so it had that open feel. Or they did lipstick repairs to cover up some deeper issues. So let's break that down so you have some specific things to look for. One is improper framing cuts. So you might see where the joists have been notched or drilled incorrectly to run maybe plumbing lines or electrical lines. And here's the rule. You're never supposed to notch or bore through certain parts of the joist, especially near the ends or the middle third of the span. Now, there are very specific rules in the code book that say where and how big these holes or notches should be, but most pro DIYers, as I call them, have no clue what a code book is. People do this crap all the time, and those joists are now permanently weakened. You'll have sagging floors, bouncy rooms, cracked tiles, all the symptoms of messed up framing. P.S. It's not just pro DIYers that do this crap. Sometimes pros do it. Next is unsupported walls. Sometimes, once again, people remove the wall between the kitchen to open it up, and they don't realize that it's a load-bearing wall. And so now the load above is being poorly transferred or not at all, i.e. they either don't put in a beam or put in too small of one, and now their house is compromised. You'll see things like sagging ceiling lines, cracks forming at the corners of the doorways, sticking doors and windows where they don't open properly, sloped floors above the space. And here's the worst part. Sometimes they hide that stuff behind new drywall and paint and trim, and it looks great until it doesn't. And what about a DIY addition? Just please run. Now, here's what you should do. Always check for inconsistencies. Does the framing look hacked together? Is anything obviously sloping, sagging, or uneven? Are walls built in weird places? Are there deck screws used inside of the house? This is like the classic DIY move because those deck screws are actually a little bit cheaper than the ones that you're supposed to use. So a lot of pro DIYers just have them on hand. Next, crawl under the house. Pop your head into the attic. Look for anything that seems like it was done on the cheap or without planning. And here's a big one. Compare the original building practices with what's there now. If it doesn't match up, question it. All right, so now that you know what to look for when it comes to hidden structural damage, I want to introduce you to something that I call the fear tax. And honestly, this is probably the most important concept that I've ever learned when it comes to managing rehabs. Because no matter how much experience you have, you're gonna hear these words at some point. Hey, we've found a structural issue and it's gonna be expensive. And that's what this section is all about. How to deal with change orders and avoid getting crushed by the fear tax. But real quick, if you're getting a lot of value out of this, let me know in the comments because I'm planning to make a full series breaking down the 7 hidden landmines that can destroy your rehab budget and that insurance won't cover. And this video is just one of them. So, all right, let's get back to it. Let's break down the fear tax and most importantly, how you can beat it. So, what is the fear tax? Well, here's how pricing for jobs normally works. You have your material plus your labor plus a markup, which is the contractor's actual pay in the deal. Pretty straightforward stuff. And you should want your contractor to be paid well. This encourages a long-term relationship, but when fear enters the equation, when a job sounds dangerous or complicated or risky or unknown, there's a multiplier that gets added to that markup. That multiplier is what I call the fear tax. Now, this fear tax isn't always malicious. It's not always your fear that's being preyed upon. Sometimes the contractor just genuinely doesn't know what they're walking into. They're the ones with the fear. Maybe they've been burnt before. Maybe they're not confident in their team's ability to handle it, so they pad the number a little bit, just in case. But whether it's intentional or malicious or not, you're the one paying for the fear. And here's the thing, you can't negotiate the fear away. You have to disarm it. So how to remove the fear tax? Well, the way that you're going to remove it is simple in concept, but hard in practice. You break the scary job down into clear, understandable parts, into tasks that aren't scary. So let's say that your contractor tells you, hey, we found a structural issue underneath the window, and it's going to be $8,000. Well, that's vague. It sounds serious. They're quoting it as one big, scary unknown, a structural issue multiplied by the fear tax. But if you've been following along here and know how to identify wood damage, you might say something like, okay, what are we specifically replacing? Is it the sill plate? Is it a couple studs? Do we need to rebuild the header? Could we just build a temporary support wall, just remove the rotted section and then build it back? Now, when you break down a big job into tasks, the fears start to go away. And with it, so does the price padding, the multiplier. So instead of structural repair, it's 1, demo the drywall and floor, 2, build a temporary wall to hold the ceiling into place, 3, demo and rebuild the wall, 4, drywall and paint. P.S. Don't forget to repair the thing that caused the issue in the first place, i.e. the water intrusion or pest destruction. Now you have simple tasks that don't get multiplied by the fear tax. It's simply material plus labor plus the contractor's markup for each of those 4 tasks that we just broke down. At that point, if your contractor still gives you an inflated number, here's what I do. I don't argue. I don't negotiate. I thank them for their quote and I call someone else. Because the moment you start negotiating down a high bid, you train your contractor that this is how it's going to go. Next time, they'll price high again, expecting to get bargained with. But that's not the kind of long-term relationship that I want. I want to know that I'm getting their real number, their best number, the first time, not some inflated figure waiting to be bargained down. So I'll say something like this. Hey, I appreciate the quote. I know that every crew has different strengths and weaknesses, and I've got this other guy who specializes in this type of repair. I'll probably have him come out and take a look. Honestly, I don't know how he's able to do this stuff at such a great price. It must be all that they do. So why don't you just continue with the original scope of work that we have agreed upon, and I'll take this one. All right, see, this way, I'm not burning any bridges, but I'm also not playing into the fear tax game, and I haven't enabled any bad habits like giving me high bids. All right, but that's not it. I have one more huge concept for you guys, and this really brings it all together. Now, you might be thinking that now that you have all of this information, you'll know when to walk away from a house, but that's not what you want to do at all. Just because a house has structural issues doesn't mean you should walk away. In fact, this is often how you get the best deals. If you know how to spot the damage, plan for it, and break it down into manageable parts, you'll be willing to buy houses that other investors would run away from. And this is how you get actual discounts on houses. You see, the going rate for the structural issue might actually be the $8,000 in that earlier example, but because of your skills in breaking things down into manageable tasks, you can now get it done for $2,000 instead of the $8,000. And those skills are what you should be paid for. You should get an $8,000 discount on this house, and you make your money in the margin. See, getting deals on houses, getting discounts on houses is really the key to success in this game. But you want to be able to sleep at night. You see, duping somebody into selling you their $200,000 house for $150,000 is not necessarily a feel-good strategy. But if you're buying houses that need work and you've developed the skills to know how to get that work done, well, you deserve to get discounts and you deserve to make that money because you're taking on a risk and you are uniquely positioned to be able to handle it. So good for you. Guys, that's why I make these videos. I realize that the biggest and most valuable tool that I have in my tool belt is understanding how houses are put together and how to use that to my advantage. Understanding how damage is caused and how to fix it and how to manage people to fix it. And I'm not trying to do that with a huge team. I'm talking about how to be a one-person real estate investing enterprise. And the key ingredient is understanding construction. And it doesn't mean doing the work yourself. It means knowing how to scope, price, and manage the work like a pro. So let me know if you guys want me to continue on and make this full series of the 7 landmines that insurance won't cover. Also, check out this video right here for a deeper understanding of how you can become a one-person real estate investing enterprise.